Financial experts are sounding the alarm of the potential impacts of the global trade war.
And new warnings about a potential recession amid the trade war with China. Consumer sentiment plummeting to one of the lowest levels on record amid a fierce trade war. Retailers are warning of empty shelves with the 145% tariff on nearly all Chinese imports in place.
We're a few weeks away from starting to see the early effects of what will happen in the transportation of goods.
The crisis we're facing can't be overstated. Nearly every U.S. industry depends on Chinese imports, and that flow is now grinding to a halt. I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. According to the World Trade Organization, trade between the United States and China could decline by as much as 80%. Even the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has called this an effective trade embargo. That's why economists say the U.S. recession is now almost a coin flip.
The escalating trade tensions between the United States and China pose a significant risk of a sharp contraction in their bilateral trade. Our preliminary projections suggest that merchandise trade between these two economies could decrease by as much as 80%. The negative macroeconomic effects will not be confined to US and China alone, but will extend to other countries.
Unless something changes, this is going to be the biggest shock to our economy in decades. At the moment, our stores are filled with products that are manufactured in factories in China. But now, many of those factories have gone eerily quiet. I know several factories that have told half of their employees to go home for a few weeks and stop most of their production, said Cameron Johnson, Shanghai-based senior partner at consulting firm Tidal Wave Solutions. He said factories making toys, sporting goods, and low-cost dollar store type goods are the most affected right now. While not large scale yet, it is happening in the key export hubs of Yiwu and Dongguan, and there's a concern that it will grow, Johnson said. There is a hope that tariffs will be lowered so orders can resume. But in the meantime, companies are furloughing employees and idling some production. We're also witnessing an unprecedented decline in cargo shipments from China to the United States. Port of Los Angeles Executive Director Gene Soroka is telling us that essentially all shipments out of China for major retailers and manufacturers have ceased. This shipping collapse isn't just a result of tariffs or political decisions. It's also being worsened by a severe shortage of freight containers. In the past, U.S. imports from China were supported by a steady cycle of containers traveling back and forth. Now, with exports from the U.S. to China plummeting, containers are piling up on the...
Need better internet than 5G? Your search is over. Get Cox Internet for just $40 a month when you add Cox Mobile. It has faster, more reliable speeds than 5G home internet. Switch today.
Financial experts are...
Containers are piling up on the American side, and shipping containers are reluctant to send them back empty. As a result, even when factories in China are ready to resume limited production, many cannot ship goods due to a lack of available containers. Some Chinese logistics firms have reported wait times of 6 to 8 weeks just to secure space on a vessel. In addition, the price of shipping a single 40-foot container from Shanghai to the US West Coast has exploded from $1,500 to over $6,000 in just 3 weeks. This spike in costs disproportionately affects smaller importers who simply can't afford to pass on those costs to consumers, meaning we could see thousands of niche e-commerce and specialty product retailers go out of business. Meanwhile, the U.S. trucking and rail industries are bracing for a sudden cliff drop in demand. Intermodal rail traffic, which links ports to inland warehouses, has already fallen 30% year over year. Major trucking firms like J.B. Hunt and Schneider have begun issuing earnings warnings, citing an abrupt deceleration in containerized freight. But good news is that major retailers still have Chinese-made goods that they previously purchased to sell to us. But as they work through their existing inventory levels, pretty soon we're going to start seeing empty shelves. In fact, the chief economic advisor to President Trump during his first term is warning that we could start experiencing significant shortages in late May.
People need to understand is the cycle from a good being sold in China, loaded on a vessel, sailed across the ocean, unloaded in the United States, put in a factory, distributed to a shelf, is about 8 weeks in the United States. So if you go back to the April 2nd date when the tariffs kicked in, you're talking about seeing the effect really May 2nd. So I would say the last couple of weeks of May, you'll start seeing this effect here. So we're a few weeks away from starting to see the early effects of what will happen in the transportation of goods.
United States shoppers have already been scrambling to avoid potential price hikes by front-loading purchases of big-ticket items like automobiles, washing machines, and electronics.
We've seen automobile sales at almost all-time record highs. So we see people buying automobiles because they're trying to avoid tariffs. They're buying consumer goods, they're buying washing machines, they're buying technology items.
While recent hard data like first quarter earnings reports have been relatively strong, Cohn emphasized that softer data like consumer confidence surveys are beginning to flash warning signs.
You start to see much more weakness in the polling there. So if you look at consumer confidence is an indication of what I'm thinking I'm going to do going forward. You start to see a lot more weakness in consumer sentiment and in consumer data.
Cohn said, noting that major consumer brands, including Chipotle, PepsiCo, and luxury giant LVMH, have warned of slowing sales in the second quarter. The tariffs are expected to hit small businesses especially hard.
You're also starting to see many of the small businesses, and this is where it's really interesting. Small businesses who have to order goods, and we saw a lot of data out of the toy industry recently. The toy industry, which is really small industry, runs the vast majority of retail toy sales. People who are ordering their toys for Christmas today have to order those toys. Those toys are now coming with a massive 145% tariff. The vast majority of small business toy stores cannot order toys today because they cannot afford the 145% tariff. So they're making a conscientious decision. They're either going out of business or they're just going to wait and see what happens.
Last week, supply chain analysts and freight insiders echoed those warnings, predicting volatile weeks ahead with rising prices and thinning inventories. Some even cautioned that if pressure continues to mount, the consequences could ripple into job losses, stock market turmoil, and increasing tensions between global powers. To make matters worse, new data shows maritime container bookings between China and the U.S. have dropped 64%, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's remarks at a J.P. Morgan conference. Cohn also warned that tariffs are highly regressive, disproportionately hurting lower-income Americans who spend a greater share of their income on basic goods. Torsten Slok, the chief economist at Apollo Global Management, is also pointing to next month as the time when we'll be seeing empty shelves in U.S. stores and stockouts similar to what we experienced during that pandemic.
This is 2nd Esdras, chapter 6, verse 22. And it says, "And suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty." First and foremost, I'd like to give all the honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Bahashem, Achak Badash. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostle of the great millstone. Peace and blessing to all Akim that are preaching and teaching this word with 100% truth and sincerity, and unto the men, women, and children that are listening and learning, and unto the Bayat, the Daludah, the elect house of David that is scattered abroad, I give you my utmost and sincere salutation. So, this is the YouTube channel Epic Economist, and you heard it. By late May, early June, we're gonna see, a lot of shortages in the storehouses. Okay, a lot of those items that people, a lot of those items that people like, they won't be abundant anymore. They'll be so far few between. If not, they'll be non-existent. And because of this, these shortages, and also, as they were saying, due to these tariffs, there's going to be higher prices. It's going to affect small businesses, and a lot of people it's also going to lead to a lot of people, mass layoffs, job losses. All these economic woes, man, are going to cause the people to lose their minds. Desperate times call for desperate measures, man. So this is 2 Esdras chapter 6, verse 22 again, and it says, "And suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty." All right? China is pulling away from America, not wanting to do business with us anymore because of America's unfair bullshit policies. Verse 23, "And the trumpet shall give a sound, which when every man heareth, they shall be suddenly afraid." So that trumpet, first and foremost, the real trumpet is the prophets. We've been sounding alarm for years, telling people that this was going to happen because it's prophecy. But the worldly trumpet would be, the news, what's going on, why is this all happening, right? And of course, the alarms that they have, alert, alert, warning, warning, whatever. Verse 24, "At that time shall friends fight against one another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The springs of the fountains shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run." So, water is now connected to the power. So if a power outage goes, then you won't have no running water. It used to not be that way, but it is now. Been that way for a while, but yeah. So not just shortages in the storehouses, but no power because there's been talks about blackouts, okay, amongst other things. And it's at that time when people are going to really turn against one another, fighting for scraps. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai he's bringing this place down. And, roughly paraphrasing, blessed is he that lives to see the downfall of his enemies. And, it's going to be a beautiful thing. All right, this is going to be 2 Esdras chapter 16, verse 21. And it says, "Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon earth that they shall think themselves to be in good case, and even then shall evils grow upon the earth, sword, famine, and great confusion." So things seem all right, but when this big thing hits, well, things don't seem all right because we can all see now that things are just getting worse and worse and worse. And again, like they said, by the end of May going into June, these people are going to think themselves that, they're no longer going to be in that good case where they can afford things. They're going to have to start rationing, managing their budgets more, restrict themselves of the pleasures, this is all. This is also going to lead to more people starving, more people committing crimes. People are going to lose it. These American people, they don't know what it's like to live in a state of adversity or uncomfortability. They've always been so comfortable. All right. So let's go ahead and finish. Like I said, this is Epic. This is from the channel Epic Economist. Experts are warning that there will be significant shortages in America by the end of next month. So this is part of Bible prophecy, and we've been telling you this. And with that, you can watch the rest of the video. Epic Economist, it's a good channel to watch. It keeps up with current events, what's going on, with the economy and the market, all that. So yeah, with that, I hope that this was edifying and an eye opener, because we're in those times that the stage is set for Jacob's trouble to go off in full effect. It's set. It's just waiting for the right moment. So this summer could be that moment, man. And with that, I'd like to give all the honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahabashai, Mahashem, HaKadosh. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostles, the great millstone. Peace and blessing to all Akim that are preaching and teaching His word with 100% truth and sincerity. And unto the men, women, and children that are listening and learning. And unto the Bayath and Dawadah, the elect house of David that are scattered abroad. I give you my utmost and sincere salutations. See you in the next lesson, Lord willing. Kwame Asherallah. Wa Abba Shalom, Barakatah.